Man, I love Star Wars. There, I said it. You still proud of me, Dad? But apparently that's a controversial thing to say because the love towards Star Wars is just as strong as the hate towards it. It's like my exact feeling towards McChickens.
Saying I like Star Wars isn't as simple as it was once upon a time. Way back in the day, you had one trilogy and some bullshit here and there. But now you got 3 completely different trilogies, a bunch of TV shows, books, video games, and so on. Each of these pieces have their own dedicated, and I mean dedicated, fan bases who will defend them tooth and nail against any potential criticism from any other sect of the fandom. The holy wars, except about which trilogy sucks more. However, I'm under the firm belief that every piece of Star Wars media, especially the movies, have some sort of merit to them. To the dismay of rage bait channels. Every movie ever made, except that one, has some sort of good quality to it, and Star Wars is no exception.
I'm going to try to be as fair as possible in trying to find the brightest spot from each film. So let's take a look at the best scene from every Star Wars movie, in my opinion.
The Phantom Menace. The pod racing scene. I know a lot of people love Duel of the Fates, but aside from the technicals, there's really not much to this scene. Basically just a video game boss fight with a villain we know nothing about. Oh, now he gets to the shield area to rebuild his stats. Can't use his force run, he depleted that earlier. The pod racing scene is a standout for admittedly more technical elements, but still something you could justify the price of admission for. I mean, the scene is 25 years old and it still holds up. Not just visually, but it also showcases some of the best sound design of the entire series. I've always liked how the series harvests its sound design from real-world things. The sound of the pod racers up close sounds like an actual engine, yet slightly alien. An aspect of Star Wars that's always appealed to me is when there are other interpretations of cinematic archetypes. Like the cantina is a western bar, or the Rancor pit is like falling into a monster pit. And pod racing is clearly inspired by both chariot racing and old Grand Prix racing. George Lucas originally wanted to be a race car driver, so his obsession with speed is on full display here. Not much to say story-wise, unfortunately. Like, even if you've never seen a Star Wars movie before, you can predict who's going to win before it even starts. But it's still the standout scene of the movie. Attack of the Clones. The arena scene. I'm not talking about the entirety of the arena stuff, just the first chunk, before it turns into an action figure fest. This has always been a standout scene because it shows the characters actually needing to problem solve in creative ways. Something that the prequels do to a hindrance is they sort of set the trend, at least movie-wise, of turning the Jedi into video gamey superhero types. I've always liked the Jedi being more of that hippie mysticism type with tinges of knighthood combat you saw in the original trilogy. But here, look at that, they don't have lightsabers, so they need to think of creative ways to fight. The stakes are also raised because Padme is basically just some lady, so she doesn't have the added benefit of the Force or any real combat training. Sure, she survived the itchy and scratchy level scene, but this actually had something going on for attention-wise. Revenge of the Sith. The scene where Anakin is told to wait in the council chamber. So this scene directly follows the one where Anakin tells Mace that Palpatine's a Sith Lord. But as Mace calmly and casually boards a gunship with a bunch of other Jedi, he tells Anakin to wait in the council chamber and that if he does, he will have earned his trust. The scene in question shows Anakin and Padme looking at one another from their respective perspectives. That's fun to say. Anakin at this point is tricked into thinking she'll die soon and that Palpatine is the only one who can help him. Him being told to wait in the council chamber is also symbolic of what he's been desiring. While Mace doesn't outright say it, he'll probably see to it that Anakin is granted the rank of Master, something he feels was cheated from him. There's a lot going on thematically here, and it's all being communicated without a word of dialogue. You know, for how blandly the prequels were shot and directed, there's a surprising amount of subtlety going on here. Way to go, George, harkening back to your American Graffiti days when you knew what good direction was. Fucking love that movie. A New Hope! The opening scene. Alright, so first John Williams hits you in the face with that music. The opening crawl sets up what the lore is all about in an easily digestible way, and as the camera tilts down, the music goes from fuck yeah triumphant to ominous and uneasy. And then goes back to large in scale, but with a feeling of dread to go with it. Teeny tiny little ship trying to outrun this massive pointy one. Now, if life has taught me anything, pointy things are scary. Just from the visuals alone, you completely understand what's going on. Small, ill-equipped rebels being chased by a virtually invulnerable empire. We don't get the two confused because the music implies danger. The music even sounds like something out of an old Hollywood film. Like if you played this for someone who somehow never heard the music of Star Wars, they'd think it could be from anything. Anyway, it's a great example of visual storytelling, and it's why A New Hope is the best Star Wars movie. Yep, it's the best, and if you think otherwise, you're wrong. Laugh at the wrong person. Empire Strikes Back. Luke and Vader's confrontation. It was a tough choice between either this or the scene where Yoda is explaining the Force. Both are highlights of the film, and it was a very hard call, but I'm going with this for a number of reasons. For one, obviously, it's one of the best looking scenes of the entire series. Like, as much as I love A New Hope, a lot of the shots are kind of rush jobs due to how much of a time crunch they were under. Here, however, the framing is super purposeful. Luke is in basically a metaphorical pit, so to speak, after falling into Vader's trap. Vader stands dominantly in complete silhouette. This is the first time the two of them have met face to face, and to Luke, this is the guy who killed his master and, to his knowledge, his father. Vader finally has Luke right where he wants him. The person he's been obsessed with finding since he blew up the Death Star, and now finds out he's his son. See, in A New Hope, Darth Vader was more or less your quintessential villain archetype, spending nearly the entire movie trudging around the Death Star. And there are times where he does teeter a little bit into Saturday morning cartoon territory.
I told you she would never consciously betray the rebellion.
In Empire, his evilness is cranked up to 11 with him letting nothing stand in his way at any point. He poses a genuine threat when we see him on screen. Luke slowly approaches him and whips out his saber super fast in an attempt to intimidate him, but Vader's like, fuck that, and slowly unsheaths his, besting Luke with one hand, basically toying with him for a while. However, when he does think he's got the upper hand, Luke pulls out an impressive move.
Most impressive.
And as the scene comes to an end, Luke kicks him off the side, giving himself the false sense of security that, hey, maybe this Vader guy ain't so tough after all. Oh, never mind. You could argue something like the I am your father scene is more important thematically, and while yes, that may be true, I'd say in terms of sheer execution, this is the standout scene of the movie. Return of the Jedi! The Vader redemption scene. This is coming right after Luke finally lets his anger out, beating Vader into submission. This is the first time we've seen him in a truly vulnerable position, but when the Emperor asks Luke to join the dark side in Vader's place and he refuses, Palpatine pumps him full of lightning and Vader gains his strength to get back up. Vader has a long internal struggle before grabbing Palpatine without saying a word and throwing him down the shaft. Yes, he didn't say a word, I don't count that garbage. What I like about this scene is how much it all clicked for Vader. He's basically back to what he was doing before, sitting idly by, ready to do the Emperor's bidding. This being right after the Emperor was ready for Luke to kill Vader, but as soon as that doesn't work, he's like, never mind, you're stuck with me still. And even after everything Luke's been put through, he still refers to Vader as his father and pleads for his help, showing that he still hasn't given up on him. This is the thing that pushes him into realizing that Palpatine isn't trying to kill the Last Jedi, he's trying to torture his son. Palpatine could kill him in a myriad of ways instantly, but instead he wants him to suffer. A fact that finally manifests into Vader realizing that it's not too late for his redemption. Something that's implied earlier that he wants, but he believes is unobtainable.
I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
It is too late for me, son.
Good cap to the trilogy, worthy of burning his corpse. The Force Awakens! Rey making dinner. I've always loved Rey's introduction since it's done completely dialogueless and feels like something that she does every day. Like this shot here, in my opinion, is one of the best of the series. But with the dinner scene specifically, I like that the payoff to her collecting all these pieces results in her being able to eat like one roll. Sitting there eating your gruel oatmeal. And the way they did this effect is really cool if you look into it. When you first see the interior of her home, you expect it to be a dungy little hut type thing, but when we pull back, hey, look at that, it's a downed AT-AT. That's very interesting since it reinforces visual storytelling that some kind of massive battle occurred there. I wish I lived in a downed AT-AT. Or do I? I don't know. Also, I like the part of her putting the X-Wing pilot helmet on, but doesn't like do anything else. Almost as if she's playing pretend in her head. Good, nice little character scene. The Last Jedi! Luke tricking Kylo. So Kylo just appointed himself a supreme leader and orders the invasion of Crate, which if they succeed means the end of the Resistance. However, Luke shows up in the nick of time to distract Kylo, who, drunk with power, halts the attack to personally deal with him. When they get down on the ground, Kylo savors every moment because he's finally about to kill the person he blames everything wrong in his life on. But just as he's about to deal the finishing blow, psych! Luke force projects himself, a power I think was really well shown in this movie, which buys the Resistance just enough time to escape. So not only does Kylo not get the satisfaction of killing Luke, but he also failed in finishing off the Resistance. He's basically a broken person in this moment. And this shows a redemption for Luke, who essentially turned his back on the rest of the galaxy by helping to save it. I also like the implied aspect that Luke hasn't used his powers to that extent in years, which wears him out completely. For how messy the script and pacing are in this movie, this was a pretty satisfying ending for me. Also, the scene right before this, that exchange him and 3PO have,
Master Luke.
nice little touch. The Rise of Skywalker. This was tough. But ultimately I decided that Han and Kylo's scene was the best of the film, for a number of reasons. Kylo at this point was a lost person right after Rey saved his life and ran away. But when Han shows up, I always interpreted this to be more metaphorical than literal. Since obviously Han wasn't a Jedi, this isn't his Force ghost or anything. Kylo needed some sort of push over the edge to abandon the dark side, while also having it be Han feels as if he believes this is the first step in atoning for killing him and making things right. Something he's probably replayed in his head constantly since their confrontation.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
So what's the takeaway here? Well, Star Wars has always been a broad strokes, mass appeal franchise. You don't become one of the highest grossing franchises of all time from being too niche. So you're dealing with a built-in audience who can be hyperbolic in their judgment. Everything's either a 10 or a 1 because it's easier to have extremes as your opinion and call it a day. However, in doing so, you potentially miss a lot of positives. Of course, the same thing can be said of people who think too highly of something and see it as flawless. There's a balance that, unfortunately, due to the nature of film discourse online, is lost sometimes.
When dealing with any sort of film, it's important to have a detailed perspective, being able to identify objectively good scenes from bad ones. Also check yourself if you start to feverishly defend a brand that hasn't done nothing for you. Like I used to defend Lifetime films as the pinnacle of cinema. I'm better now.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.